Hey everybody, Z Garcia here, and today I'm going to be comparing this game right here, which is known in English as Dark Whisperings, from Michael Reineck, with a newer printing called Venturesome here from the same designer, which is a very clear evolution, re-implementation of this original Dark Whisperings game. So I'm going to be comparing them, showing you some of the differences. Some will be very obvious, like the box size and the theme has changed. This one has a court intrigue theme. This one has an Indiana Jones-esque exploration theme. So those things are clear and out of the way, but I'm going to be diving into how the games work, what has been changed from one to the other, and what I think of those changes. This Dark Whisperings game is one I've had in my collection for a long time, and this is a new addition to it. So fairly recent release there. So let's go ahead and dive into that. Before I tell you the nitty-gritty, let's talk about generally in broad strokes what the games are about. So in both of these games, you are going to be playing cards in front of you, creating your own tableau, trying to not be forced to play a card of a type you've already got in front of you. Because if you do so, you have to pass and you are out of the round. You will therefore try to manipulate your hand of cards so that you can continue playing characters that aren't showing yet, getting their special abilities, all of which manipulate what's going on in some way. Switch a card with another player, pick one from the table back up so you can play it again and re-trigger that ability. Switch one card in front of you with one card on the table in front of someone else. These sorts of things, therefore, ideally coming out ahead in the game. And having the most points once the game is over. So let's go ahead and dive into looking at some of these components. I'll always have the original game on this side and the new game on the other. Setting up the games is pretty different and immediately points to one major rule change that has been implemented into the new game. Let's go ahead and talk about that. So to set up the game, the new game, you're going to take every character card, you're going to shuffle them up, and you make a deck from that. So it's all of these cards here. And you use the entire deck no matter how many people are playing. There's two other smaller decks of cards here. This one here, the Intimidation deck, there is something similar in the original game. And then this, which is the Threats deck, there's nothing quite like that in the original. We'll take a look at that a little later on. To set up the original game, you only utilize the colors of the players that are at the table. So if someone's playing yellow, then you will use these yellow cards. If no one's playing purple, then these are not in the deck. Same thing for all the other colors. So let's say we've got a player playing yellow, blue, and red. These green ones are also out. And then there's some brown cards that are always in play. So no matter how many players are playing, you have their colors and the brown cards here. And then everybody is going to also have these two cards that will be a reference for the different character abilities, as well as a way to keep victory points. So every color has one of those. Besides that, there is a deck here that works the same way as these that cancels the abilities of the characters. So for example, if I've got this king showing, I cannot play these characters. Or rather, I can play them, but the ability will not trigger. And again, that symbol ties to one of these characters in here. This deck works exactly the same way. It cancels one of these characters, so I can't play any of those. The difference being, in the new game, I cannot play that character whatsoever. In the original game, you could play them, just their ability wouldn't happen. So slight difference there. There's also something else that is very important, and the reason why these cards are colored, really. In the new game, on your turn, you play a card, you take your turn. Ideally, you're able to play one. And then the next player to go is whoever's to your left. You just go around the table clockwise. In the original game, these cards are all shuffled up and you have a hand of them. And on your turn, you'll play a card. Ideally, you'll do the ability much like you would in the new game. But then the next player to play is whoever's color you just placed on the table in front of you. So if I'm yellow and I play this, the red player is next. If it's one of the brown cards that don't belong to anyone, then the player who has the fewest cards in front of them has to play next. If there's a tie, I pick who plays next. So that's a very big difference in the way that the cards are played around the table. With the original game having a stranger, more clever way to do that, the new one being much more simple and stripping away that little wrinkle. Since I've been talking about these characters, let's go ahead and take a look at the different characters. And we're going to start them. I've set them up so we have the similar characters side by side here. We'll begin with this one. This is the court jester over here, this photographer on the side. It's the one character that has no ability. Ideally, you want to play them because you have another card in front of you, but they do not have an inherent ability, and it's the same for both of these. Then we've got this character here who is the one who is going to bring the king into play, or the one that puts one of those intimidation cards into play. Whenever you play this card, in this case, you reveal the next king card, and it cancels the abilities on that card. You just flip over the next one from the shuffled king deck. And in this case, you look through the entire deck and pick the one you want. And again, that card cannot be played at all in the new game. It forbids players from playing that card. And if it's the only card you have to pass playing on that. And you're out of that round. So slightly different, but they utilize the same idea. This idea of canceling one specific kind of card. Next up, we've got over here this one that lets you take a card back into your hand from your display. And these work the exact same way. It cannot be the brand new card you just played. You have to take another card, add it to your hand. Same thing here. Take a card, add it to your hand. These are the exact same for both games. And again, the idea of that is just to be able to play a card again and utilize that ability one more time. Like maybe this one, the cupbearer, which in fact was able to keep its symbol from one game to the other. But the idea here being you can exchange one card in your display with a card in someone else's display. And it's the same thing over here. It cannot be this brand new card, but it lets you switch a card. And in fact, by doing so, you're allowed to break that one play rule, which says you cannot play something that you've already got in front of you. If you're switching a card with someone else, you can create a display that has more of one kind. You just couldn't play that card from your hand. So these are, again, the exact same thing. We've got these over here, and they work slightly differently. The original character here, you would discard a card from your hand to the bottom of the deck, and then you draw one from the deck. Again, trying to find non-duplicated cards. The new one is slightly better. You first draw a card, and then you bury one from your hand. So it's slightly more powerful, but the idea is the same. Down here, we've got, again, a very similar one, but there's a couple of changes. In the original game, you are switching cards from your hand with somebody else, and you can decide how many, as long as both players have at least that many cards. So you can do 1 to whatever. If I have 3 cards and one of my opponents has 4, I could say, okay, we'll switch 3. They get to keep 1. They'll give me 3, I give them 3. We look at them simultaneously. The original one is going to be slightly different. It's only 1 card, and I get to give my opponent a card. They look, they give me 1 back. So that's how that works. And then the last one, these are different. And the original one was very simple, not a great power. I can definitely see why they dropped it. But the original one was, when you played this, you have to show everybody else your hand. That's it. No benefit for you, really. Everyone just gets to see what you're still holding. The new one here, you play this, you switch your entire hand with someone else. So it sort of breaks this card down into 2 different things. Switch a single card, kind of like the original, or switch your entire hand. But they don't have to be equal. So more powerful than something like this. And plus, they got rid of this power, which again, like I said, I thought was a little less than ideal. Didn't really do anything, but you were willing to show other players the rest of your hands because you were able to play the card out on the table. So that's the powers of the cards. Let's go ahead and get back into a little bit of the gameplay. So here we're taking a look at Dark Whisperings about a round into play so that you understand some of the ideas in it, okay? It is Yellow's turn to play because this is the card that was just placed. And so they are going to pick up their hand of cards and they're going to deploy one of those, as long as it's different from this one, if at all possible. So they're actually going to play this card here. And this one then triggers the ability where they flip over one of the king cards. So we flip this over and that character card can still be played in this edition of the game, but the ability won't trigger. Now, because this is purple here, that denotes that this purple player is the next one to play, and they'll grab their hand of cards and play one of those. And in fact, in this case, they are going to play that very card. that symbol that the king is canceling because, well, this is actually a lucky break that do not have to show the other players their hand of cards. Having played that, it's a brown card. That means whoever has the fewest cards in front of them is the next one to play. And it would be this player over here who is playing red. And this is going to continue. In fact, if you play a card of your own color, after triggering the ability, you go again. The idea is the players are going to continue playing these rounds, shuffling everything up, starting again, resetting the king in between every round, until someone gets to 6 points, or 5 depending on the player count. And that player, if they're the only ones who have that many points, they're going to be the winner. If there's a tie, then whoever has the most cards during that final round. And the idea then is that if you are the one who is able to go out, if you can play 6 different cards in front of you, the round is over and you score a victory point. If you are forced to play a card and you cannot because you would double up, then everybody else gets a point. So if this player forces yellow to play next and they cannot play a card, then both purple and red would score 1 point, and we shuffle up, getting rid of everything, shuffling the entire deck, resetting the king, and try for another round. So the number of rounds is, well, it's up to the players. It depends how quickly we get to those 6 points. And as you can see, probably, this game tends to, because of the scoring, have a lot of ties. There are a lot of ways in which, because everything is 1 point. So maybe you're earning a point or everybody else is earning a point, and so the players tend to progress very evenly to the point that at the end of the game, oftentimes there is a tie. And it comes down to, I have 6, you have 6, you played 4 cards, I played 3, so you win this last one. And it can feel a little bit arbitrary. That final round can feel a little punishing. And just the scores are so tight that it doesn't feel particularly rewarding from that point of view. That was my biggest hang-up for the original game. And the new game, Venturesome, certainly fixes that. Let me wipe all this away and show you how that one goes. We're here also a couple of rounds into the game. I'll remind you, in this one, we simply go clockwise around the table. And it is this player's turn to play. Now, the card colors in this game simply have to do with the characters. They do not tie to the player sitting at the table. So every time you see this handsome professor here, he'll be yellow. It doesn't have anything to do with the players at the table. The symbols in the corners, though, will be different, and that's how you score in this game. And so we continue doing the same thing. We're playing a card, triggering the ability, doing whatever that requires of us, remembering that if you do play the card that lets you change one of these, if you do play this card, you get to look through the entire deck here and cancel whichever kind of card you want to. It's not just a random flip as it is with the king deck. And that card cannot be played at all. Not that you could play it and ignore the power. You simply cannot play it. As soon as a player is unable to play, then they are going to pass, okay? And there's one new mechanism in this which was not at all available in the previous game. We're going to take a look at those right now, these right here. So this deck gets shuffled and we reveal a number of these cards equal to the number of players. So in this case, this is what we've got. And as soon as a player passes in this game, they have to select one of these hazards, deal with what it says, and then flip this card face down, leaving fewer options for the other players. And so perhaps you have to discard every one of your cups and every one of your idle cards in front of you. So if this player, for example, for some reason was ready to pass now because literally they could not play any other cards, then they could pick that and they would lose, well, nothing, because their cards don't match any of those. This one over here forces you to discard your 2 cards on the opposite ends. And in this game, when you play, you have to play to one side or the other. Whereas the geometry in Dark Whisperings doesn't matter whatsoever. You just play it anywhere you want in front of you. So this is how you are now penalized, how you have to lose things. Dropping out earlier gives you a better option here, but staying in longer lets you gather more cards. And you play in this game, you always play 3 rounds. You're not racing to any number of victory points. At the end of those 3 rounds, you are going to count up your points. And again, I'll remind you, you lose whatever this card forces you to lose, flip it, and everything left in front of you, you gather and put in a scoring pile. So at the end of the game, the scoring then is gems are 1 point apiece. So this would be 5 points. There's symbols, which are going to be 1 point apiece, such as these right here. But if you have triplets, that's bonus points. So if I get another one of these idols, I can get some bonus points. And then there's also these maps that give you a point per everything in that color, including itself. So if I have this map and a couple of other red cards, that'll be another 3 points. 1, 2, 3 for the other 2 cards. So that's how scoring works, which right there changes up the biggest issue I had with the original game, which was that very tight scoring, that idea of just everything grinding to a halt in the end, and sometimes it feeling like it's a coin flip on the very final turn as to how well you actually did and whether you were able to win. You can now worry about these things and how you collect, what you collect, how you are attempting to win. You got this early red map, then try to play these red cards. Try to collect a lot of those so you can get a bunch of bonus points. And you can actually change your fate a little bit. Now, again, these cards, once you're done, they would go away, and we would flip over 3 new ones for the next round. In this case, again, with 3 players. 2 cards next to each other. Everything that has a 1 gem and a 2 gem, so you've got to be careful with that one. And every card of those types. So, very interesting. It changes up the game quite a bit. I very much hope that this video has illustrated the evolution of these 2 games from one another. Dark Whisperings here, being a game from many years ago, having some very interesting, clever ideas, but perhaps a lack of simplicity, a lack of clarity, and some scoring issues being now transposed into this new game with much more straightforward ideas, moving around the table as one would expect, but keeping some of those interesting abilities, keeping some of that chaotic nature, but loosening up the scoring so that players can pursue different things, and it does not feel as, well, lucky who it comes down to that win. So there you go. Make sure you look for my review of Venturesome here. It should be available to you, so you can check that out on the channel as well. But thanks very much for checking this out. Like I said, hopefully this was of interest to you. Let me know in the comments below what you think of these, if you've played either one of them, and if there's any other games that you think are interesting evolutions of one another. I'm curious. Perhaps it'll even be something I can cover here on the channel. So there we go, folks. That's it. My name is Zeke Garcia. Thank you very much. I'll see you on the next one.